You're late, Herb. The judge nearly finished his charge to the jury.
Well, I had an important client, a paying one. What's on your mind?
You know anything about this trial?
Only what I read in the papers. You're the star witness, if I recall.
I made the arrest. Thought I had a guilty man in there. Now I'm not sure.
Why not?
Reed come up with a story about trying to burn his house down for the insurance money. Look, you got 15 minutes. I want to hear how the judge interprets it. I'll fill you in later.
15 minutes is all I've got, Lieutenant.
It won't take long.
And according to these witnesses, the defendant was the last person seen with the deceased. The murder weapon, a pair of paper hanger scissors, is admittedly the property of the defendant. He claims he loaned those scissors to the deceased. But the most damaging evidence was discovered in the defendant's fireplace. It consisted of ashes of burned clothing, in which were found shirt and trouser buttons. The defendant yesterday stated the clothes he burned were rags, soaked with paint thinner, with which he intended to destroy his home. He stated that after he left the deceased at her house, he went home only to discover his arson attempt had failed. The candle he had placed on top of the clothing had blown out. He then stated he threw the clothing into the fireplace and burned it. The prosecution maintains the clothing was burned because it was stained with blood. It is up to you to decide what the truth is. And on that decision, will rest your verdict.
The judge concluded his charge and sent the jury to begin deliberations. It was easy to predict their verdict.
Let's move over here. That's his wife behind us.
His wife testify in his behalf?
Nobody did, Herb. Poor Slav didn't even have a character witness.
Well, he's got a good lawyer. I'm sure Mark Duran did everything he possibly could for him.
What could Mark do when he didn't even tell him about the arson?
You mean Mike didn't know?
He almost flipped yesterday when Reed come out with it. I felt Reed was holding something back, and this arson story makes sense. He wanted money. Money is what his wife wanted, and he wanted her back. Herb, I've got to find out whether I'm right or wrong.
Well, Lieutenant, I appreciate your interest in his behalf.
This is your meat, Herb. You're always complaining to me about how innocent your clients are.
He's not my client.
I can get it for you cheap. Mark wants to talk to you.
No. Mark, good to see you. I'm afraid this is very presumptuous of me.
No, not at all, Herb. As I told Lieutenant Weston, I could use some help.
Will the defendant please rise?
The jury was out less than half an hour. Their decision was no surprise. Edward Reed was found guilty of murder in the second degree. That's where the DA got its ground for Reed's motive from prejudiced gossips who didn't know what they were talking about.
Don't get mad at me, Herb. I brought you in on this, remember?
Lieutenant, I want you to call the DA's office first thing in the morning and find out who besides Edith Gray claimed that Eddie was in love with and jealous of Georgia Mayhew.
I'll do that. You finished? Here's the lab report. It shows traces of paraffin in the ashes.
And that proved the arson story.
It does to me.
The ashes, the motive. Now, all we have to explain is the scissors. How did she get them and why? I think we better talk to Eddie.
You got 15 more minutes, sir?
He's all right. The sheet tore. Imagine a guy trying to do a thing like that because his wife wouldn't visit him.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Good morning, Herb.
I went up to see Mrs. Reed last night. She's gone to see her husband.
Is she over there now?
That's right.
Well, I've been waiting for you so we can talk to Eddie about those scissors.
He's been waiting 3 months to talk to her, Lieutenant.
Oh. Well, I've been up half the night trying to get a new angle on this case, and I think I got one that makes sense.
Georgia took those scissors for protection?
Oh, you've been thinking about it, too.
There wasn't much else to think about last night. Did you call the DA's office this morning?
Yes, I did. They weren't much help. They came up with Charlie Parker, Edith Gray, the fellow who owns a bar, Sherwood. They gave him all the dope on Eddie and Georgia. I think we ought to concentrate on who Georgia was afraid of. We agree she didn't take those scissors to cut her hair.
She had a lot of boyfriends. You got a list?
Well, only the ones I checked out. 3.
All the alibis.
All clean.
I want to hear Joe Logan's.
Well, I talked to him myself. He was working that night. 5 witnesses. Sergeant Miller checked out a guy named Phil Webster. Another boyfriend. He was at a party. 10 witnesses. Miller also checked out Charlie Parker.
What is it?
Charlie Parker was with Edith Gray.
How many witnesses?
Just her.
And Charlie was the only one of George's boyfriends to throw stones at Eddie. Why?
Georgia wasn't afraid of Charlie. I think she took those scissors to defend herself against somebody who didn't like her. Now, Mrs. Reed ought to be through by now. Let's go on over.
I keep telling you, Lieutenant, Georgia wasn't afraid of anybody that I know of.
She must have been afraid of somebody, Eddie. Think.
I've done my best. I can't say that she had enemies if I don't know who it would be.
Well, who did she go to? Who did she tell her troubles to?
I don't know.
Eddie, let's go over this again. What happened the night you drove Georgia home? Is she in the habit of inviting you to her room?
No. It's the first time she ever did.
It was after you refused that she asked to borrow the scissors. Isn't that right?
Well, I didn't notice. I was too busy listening for the sound of the fire engines.
If you didn't kill her, Eddie, who did?
What kind of a question is that? I've been trying, Lieutenant, ever since you put me in jail. I haven't been thinking of anything else. I'd say it was Joe Logan, if he wasn't working that night.
Why?
Well, he's got a terrible temper. He beat up a couple of guys, including Charlie.
Was Charlie still going with Georgia at the time?
I think so. But wait a minute, let me, my wife left me the 1st of July. Yeah, that's right. Charlie stopped going with her after the fight.
Eddie Reed didn't know it, but he'd given us answers to 2 important questions. The jealousy motive attributed to him fitted Charlie and might explain George's fear. A man who'd lost her affections in a fist fight could be dangerous.
I told one officer where I was that night.
Well, I want to hear the story from you, Charlie. Maybe you forgot something.
Well, I had dinner at Sherry's like always, and I waited for Edith. She got off early that night, about 9:30. We went for a ride and then parked out in front of her house in my car.
What time was that?
About 11.
What time did you leave it?
About 12. But you guys wrote these things down.
Oh, we do, Charlie. It's just that somebody might have seen you sitting in your car.
Well, I don't know who. Edith will tell you I was with her.
When you left the bar, were Georgia and Eddie still there?
I said goodnight to him.
Did you say goodnight to Joe Logan?
He wasn't there. He had to work.
How do you know?
Everybody knows what nights Joe works.
Oh, the fight that you had, Charlie, what was it about?
Who told you?
Well, it wasn't about Georgia, if that's what you're thinking.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks. You get kind of green when I mention the fight.
Yes, I noticed.
If he's lying, then Edith is. Makes her an accessory. I don't
She's
think...
not very clever, Lieutenant.
But she's not that dumb. Why don't we talk to her while we're here?
Later. I'd like to go over to the Star Industrial Laundry first.
What for?
Lieutenant, if you owned a garage and had some blood-stained clothing, what kind of a laundry would you send it to, huh?
Yeah.
Industrial laundries supply both coveralls and wiping cloths to their customers. They operate on a lease basis for a flat weekly fee. The bookkeeper allowed us to check Charlie Parker's bill for the week of the murder. Added to the normal fee was the charge for laundering a sports shirt and pair of trousers.
What good will it do her if we can't get anything out of those clothes?
What about the benzodine test?
They're bleached down.
How many people know that?
Oh, not many, I guess.
I think we have enough to go see Edith. If Eddie Reed hadn't already been convicted of George's murder, Lieutenant Weston would have arrested Parker on suspicion and confronted him with Edith at headquarters. The situation was different now. We had to break Parker without him knowing it. Fortunately for us, Edith Gray was susceptible to the power of suggestion.
Why should I want to change my story? Charlie was with me till 12 o'clock, like I said.
Oh, we think he wasn't.
What kind of clothes was Charlie wearing that night?
Why?
Have you ever seen him wear the same clothes again?
Oh, sure. I remember the shirt. It was one of those Hawaiian ones, you know, with lots of colors.
What happened to Charlie's clothes that night, Edith?
Well, nothing happened. What are you guys getting at?
He sent them to the laundry the next day. We think they were stained with George's blood.
Well, you guys must be out
Edith,
of your
we're going
mind.
to get a search warrant. We're going to take all of Charlie's clothes down to the lab. You see, blood stains never completely disappear, even though they've been washed 50 times.
But Charlie didn't kill her. Well, he was through with her. Everybody knows
Let's get that search warrant, Herb.
Maybe you'd like to change your story, Edith. We'll be back again.
We're not through yet, Edith.
Now, look, I told Charlie what you said, and he didn't do it. So you take his clothes, and you do whatever
You sticking your neck out, huh?
What would you say?
Hold it, Charlie. We're going to want what's in there.
It's just rags soaked with oil.
Yeah. Bring it in.
You recognize this? Isn't this the shirt he wore that night?
Charlie, you were with her, weren't you? It was always Georgia, wasn't it? It was never me.
She didn't know anything.
Counselor, looks like you just lost yourself a client.
Easy come. Easy go.